I'm glad she's not here.
No. I mean,
you guys would be duking it out up here.
We've come to respect each other, and certainly.
But apropos of criticism, I was actually going to ask Robin. Your shows, are they reviewed by the local media? Do you find that you get good feedback? And do you feel that your work has helped to further careers of certain artists, maybe not the mid-career artists who you're showing, but some of the more unknown artists, like the woman you mentioned who was in this show, who's Belgian living in Paris? Has she gotten traction because of her exposure?
I think so. I mean, I worked in New York for 7 years at the Guggenheim and as a consultant for the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And when I was doing those jobs, I was really working in the 60s, often with artists who were no longer living. And so it was a cast of thousands, and it was a very prominent curator I was supporting. Since I've been doing my own shows and making those decisions, I've been in smaller cities where, there just isn't as much of a critical community, and even newspapers, are closing. So the possibility of getting shows reviewed in St. Louis and getting shows reviewed in San Diego, those chances are modest. I mean, we do get reviewed occasionally in San Diego by the LA Times, and we do sometimes get little mentions in Art Forum and Art in America. But I think that I know that the shows I did in St. Louis and I'm starting to do in San Diego have helped the careers of younger artists and less well-known artists, more through efflux announcements and all the kind of marketing we can manage to do online, because not everybody comes to those cities. But Katerina, for example, the lender who loaned the White Reed pieces that are in the show is on the Visiting Friends Committee for the Pompidou. And so he was asked to, so he came to our opening, he met Katerina, he liked her work, and then he was invited to jury an art prize in Paris, which I think she'll get because he met her at the show. So that happens.
Right. I mean, I think one of the reasons that, we wanted to have this sort of trifecta, but has become a well, it's still a trifecta, is to kind of allude to the fact that there is a system for good, for better or worse, in place that as an artist you have to be aware of if you're ambitious on a certain level and operate within. And some artists are more adept at working that system than others. I
must say, I work a lot with curators, and many of our artists are Biennale type artists. When I see a show on eFlux listed by a certain curator or somebody who I respect, I'll Google every name on that list. I don't, and unfortunately you probably know, the art fairs have become a very important place as well for curators, for critics, and dealers to see work, unfortunately, I think. There are lots of realities here in terms of sort of building your careers. And
so, Wendy, I'm behind you. So I think we'll open this up for questions now. All right. Again, raise your hand high, please, and we'll get a mic to you.
Hello? Okay. So I work at the museum, and I'm really grateful that you guys came and are speaking so openly and honestly about the way things work. And I'm in the education department, so I feel sort of grateful and lucky that the judgment questions are not necessarily in my ballpark. But the way you've been talking, there's so much that's about, person-to-person connections, who you saw at an art fair. A curator you like, so you look at what they have. So there's so much that's so sort of interpersonal and subjective about it. And yet, in my experience, in my communication with friends I went to grad school with who are now curators, and just the language of judgment, the words quality, this is important, this is not important. That kind of language is the language that is very confidently used, and I understand that it needs to be in order for you to do your jobs, but I'm sort of interested in the twain between that understanding that this is personal and subjective and the use of language that implies objective, fact, important, quality. Those are words that scare me to use because I'm looking at a different aspect of it, but it's interesting to me that, you know, I'm grateful I don't have that responsibility, but I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about that challenge.
Well, I mean, I think there's a certain level, you're already at a level of looking for excellence, I think, in terms of the craft and the skill. If you're a painter, if you're an installation artist, I mean, I think it's, you know, I don't show artists just because they have a social agenda. I mean, for me, it's to find the balance where an artist is articulate in the work and has the skill. And I think, you know, there are many B artists out there who are amazingly ambitious hustlers who get galleries and get shows. Should they be where they are? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know for myself, when I ran grant programs, there were criteria of excellence. And when I'm a dealer now, I use those same criteria. I don't know about you.
How about you, Robin? I agree. I mean, the social thing helps, but I would never show an artist just because I like them. I mean, but if you have two artists who are equally compelling and one is easy to work with and one is not, I mean, I try to avoid, when I talk about art, using words like the best or the most important. It's usually more about interesting, compelling, asking good questions. When craft is an issue in the making of the work, I do consider it. You know, is it well made? Sometimes that's not the point, and then that's not the question, but I hope I've answered. Mm-hmm.
Hi. I have a question for emerging artists. I think most of us who are emerging artists want to know, how do we get our work into galleries? I had a professor who told me there's only about 5 galleries in New York who will actually look at your work, and he gave me the list. These are the places you should try. He said most people won't look at the packets. I've been told you should call and ask what the submission policies are of a gallery, and I even have not gotten responses from those things when I've never email, I guess, always call. But any real basic advice for us?
I think like any other profession, you have to do a lot of research. I mean, you know, I think very few galleries take unsolicited, you know, packages. I tend to look at work that is recommended to me by my patrons, my collectors. I tend to look at work that's recommended to me by curators. But I must say, you know, I won't make a studio visit unless even, you know, at a certain point where after reviewing that work and other, you know, I have a real sense that maybe it fits into our program, or I give advice to go to other, you know, galleries, or frankly to just start showing. I mean, I think the best advice in terms of getting the attention of a gallerist or a curator is to just go and do shows. I mean, Damien Hirst is the perfect example. He basically bucked the whole system. I mean, he started curating those early shows with the YBAs and basically put them on the map. Really, you know, did his own sort of guerrilla thing, still doing his own guerrilla thing. But I think, you know, you are not powerless in terms of, you know, the nonprofit institutions that exist, renting a space and then getting the dealer to come. You know, if there's enough energy and generated, I think, you know, we will show up at those, you know, events and shows.
I also would like to add, I'm really more of a middleman, and because I work in the art world, sometimes I'll meet an artist who will say to me, you know, how do I get my work into a gallery? And I always say, you know, I'm really not the right person to ask, because I don't do that. I don't make studio visits. I really am much more comfortable working with artists who are already involved in a system, because that's the nature of my particular business. But I've had so much experience as, you know, on the front lines when I was a receptionist at galleries and all throughout my career, where I would see artists. I have so much empathy for artists who really do want to break into the system. It is really a matter of knowing who you are and who your art is for. I think it helps to be articulate about your work, and to have an identity about your work and an awareness of where your ambition is. There are some artists who really have tremendous ambition and want to see their work in museums and on a global stage. There are other artists who just want to sell their work, and they're happy to sell it to whoever is willing to buy it. And there are galleries who address that market, and there are galleries that address the market that's geared more towards the global platform of an artist's work. And there is no right way to get your work out there. There's no, I really don't believe in judging an artist for what level of ambition they aspire to, but for you personally, it really helps if you have a clear sense of where you would like to see your art hanging. Is it in a beautiful, hotel? Is it in a shopping mall? Is it in a corporate space? Is it in a museum? These are the questions you have to ask yourself and then do your research. You can't just blindly kind of research the whole market. You have to really focus, and I don't think you can focus until you know yourself where you see your work going.
You also need a website. I have to say, critical, really critical. I mean, we discovered Nina, we heard about her, but frankly, we went online. Her videos were online on a website. And I think if you're working today and, for whatever aspect of the business, you need to have a website. So. Yes.
When you're looking as far as, I'm right here, as far as the artists that you're choosing, are you choosing artists that have a certain educational background? Does that matter if they have an MFA? What is kind of your process in judging an artist in terms of their education, or does it not have relevance at all?
You told me. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I think, artists who, I don't really show any artists who are self-discovered artists. I mean, I won't use the word outsider, but, I'll use the word outsider. I think most of the artists that I tend to work with have come through some form of art education. The type of program I have, these are artists who have learned how to be articulate in their work. So there is some level of skill there. But I do agree, I don't think there's a lot of teaching going on how to survive sort of post-school. And I'm shocked, for example, now that Columbia actually is part of the Armory VIP tour. You can go to the Columbia students' studios as part of sort of the VIP program, which would never have happened 10 years ago. I mean, it's shocking. I mean, my wrists were slapped when I was at Yale, 5 years ago, looking at artists' work. So I would say there's some strange things going on in terms of the sort of our university systems, and in terms of trying to prepare artists for the market, but not, finding a way yet that sort of makes sense. But, artists need to be able to be articulate and have some sense of critical skill. I mean, there's a lot of editing that goes on too, even just to learn within a studio practice, how to edit your work is huge. And I do a lot of that as a dealer. When you were talking about how do you prepare for a show with an artist, I mean, when they're in the studio, there's a lot of stuff going on, and not everything makes sense to be put out there to the public. So, that comes from, I think, being in an art school to some degree.